from your experience just working with Gen Z directly or even clients, like what are some practices? Like you mentioned gamify, and I really like if we had to break some of these HR metrics in numbers, and just so that it almost seems to them that, hey, listen, this can be achievable. But any practices that come to mind, or anything that you sense that, hey, these are one or two companies, or these are two or three trends that I've seen which are like cutting edge and kind of different, and Gen Zs are like really looking for that, or they're very happy about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll actually start with gamification because
Sure.
I have a really fun example, and then we can kind of zoom out more on the organizational level. But I just have to give a shout out to someone I met a month or two ago. He was a manager at one of the large tech companies, and same issue they were dealing with. People were disengaged. They weren't seeing progress in their careers. And then again, this is why I like to say creative. It's that he didn't spend a whole lot of money on this. He spent some time and energy. So what he did, and I love that this is an international podcast. I think Mario is pretty international. Right? Everyone knows Mario and Mario Kart, right?
Yeah.
So he essentially created a printout at their office, and also you could view it online, where people had a Mario Kart-esque track. And so, yeah, for those of you who played Mario Kart, there's like boxes along the way where you get power-ups.
Yeah.
And you can run into obstacles too. And so he kind of created this whole almost Monopoly version of Mario Kart. And so people could actually see their progress around the track. He would update it, and they would have various power-ups along the way, and they get rewards, whether it's digital rewards or parking spots, gift cards, etc. And people really got excited about it, and it really created this fun atmosphere to something that was otherwise, what's more like either boring or scary, an annual review.
Right.
He turned this progress into something very tangible and fun. And so I thought that example was so cool, because again, that didn't mean that he invented some dashboard that took 3 years to develop and implement. They just created it out of cardboard paper and printouts.
So they have to kind of walk. I mean, like every milestone, like either if they've done something, it can be like, it'd be like, power up moment. And
exactly.
If on a project, they're going down the dungeon or something. I played Mario many years back.
Yeah.
It's
like little rewards, but people still appreciate that. And it's not only the reward, it's the recognition that they did achieve something. And so often people just go unthanked for putting in those hard hours. And naturally, people think twice about doing that the next time if no one even seems to care. So yeah, I liked that example. Zooming out a little bit to your greater point about just how can companies engage at a organizational level. I think this is so important. This is where leadership plays such a big role. I find that a lot of times at organizations, the leaders, you have these and this is sort of the time of the year as we get this ready for 2024, you have these really high stakes, all hands kind of meetings, right? A lot of times those will happen at the beginning of the year. Okay. And that tends to be where mission and goals, that tends to be where that's most discussed. January, February, here's our grand mission for 2024. However, at a lot of companies, that kind of messaging where it's very values based, it's very mission centric, that tends to fall off after those big meetings, right? Then it just comes down, you get into your day-to-day tasks, and you kind of lose that forest for the trees analogy, if you will. And so Gen Z as a generation statistically, and you mentioned some of the amazing reports that exist out there that are comprehending 20,000, 40,000 respondents, pretty incredible research that some of these companies like Gallup have done. It shows that Gen Z resonates the most with values of any generation. They're the most motivated by their values manifesting in their organizations and in their professional capacity. And so the challenge to managers, to leaders out there is, let's make sure, yes, of course, for these big all hands meetings, we are leading with values. We are getting everyone excited about what we're trying to achieve. But let's really make sure that that doesn't just disappear February through December. Let's make sure that on our day, and this is where top down is so important, right? Now we're talking about middle managers. Now we're talking about even lower level managers. How do we make sure we're infusing our values into everyday projects that we're doing and making sure that each employee, famous example is, forgive me, I'm not going to get all the attribution right, but the story generally goes this: you got kind of three brick makers, and they're laying bricks, and one of them, they ask, hey, what are you doing? And the one guy says, hey, I'm like building this little line here. And then they kind of ask the next person, he's stacking bricks. What are you doing? Well, I'm building this room. And then you ask the third person, and they're like, I'm building a church. And so they're seeing this kind of grand vision, even though they're one contributor of hundreds of different laborers who are helping put these bricks together. But they see that big picture. They see that grand vision of how, even on the individual level, laying brick by brick, they understand what they're trying to achieve. That it's difficult to maintain that over the course of the year. But again, Gen Z, that's going to especially lead to higher engagement. If they don't feel that, you're going to get to that situation where they're just looking at, okay, this is just a paycheck type of job. And if I'm not growing, and if I can get a better paycheck elsewhere, what rationale would I have to stay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, you mentioned, look, about, the vision. And I recall a conversation with another guest where they were saying that there's a European insurance company, and they were revamping their mission and vision and mission. And then what they saw from kind of the demographics of the company or the talent bench is that, a large part of maybe perhaps the boomers or Xers are going to be out in the next few years. And so they actually got a more or a larger percentage of the Gen Z or the millennial and the Gen Z population to be involved in the exercise, which traditionally,
I like that.
Traditionally would have been just the senior leadership trying to frame the next purpose or the next vision and mission statement, but that senior leadership may only have a limited kind of time on in that company. And so I thought it was very interesting. And the other example I thought, perhaps just for you to know, is that you must have heard of SAP, SAP, the ERP company. And I recall reading what they do is that they actually have created these short TikTok videos. And the senior leadership, some 40 of the senior leaders have actually created these TikTok videos in which they convey their values and mission vision. And so their assumption is that, here is a cohort who doesn't have a lot of attention span. And so it may be futile for them to go and read an annual report or even on the website. So maybe the TikTok is a medium. And furthermore, so let's say if I'm going to work for SAP, but I'm going to be based in Austin, then I need to, they've gone a step further where they've created videos where they have SAP offices to say that this is where you can go in Austin to, eat on weekends. Or these are where the libraries are, and this is where the sporting events are. So I think, in a way, it's more in a kind of a strategy to bring them in, but I thought it was kind of unique. And
I am a big fan. It's a tremendous example, and the underlying principle we're describing is trying to meet employees where they are, right? And that's exactly right. The idea of traditionally you give a one-way keynote in that all hands meeting I described, and then a lot of top level executive comms, they come through a newsletter, right? Some sort of email, and it's boring to anyone, but especially a generation that's used to consuming short form video content largely. And so I really appreciate that example of trying to create comms, because you would think as a leader, your goal would not just to be to have some nice document that you think looks nice. The goal should be that people will look at it and read it or view it and engage with it. And so that comes down to trying to find out, as you indicated, the majority of the core workforce, not looking at the C-suite, is probably comprised of millennials, increasingly Gen Z, some Gen X.
Yeah.
And so how do they want to consume things? And Slack is an amazing, not just Slack, but all these messaging tools. There's so many abilities to share more of that type of content. And I would encourage also, and you mentioned it, inviting that two-way feedback, right? One of the thing that immediately jumped out when you told that story, one of my very first jobs, I was in outside sales. I was traveling 3 out of 4 weeks of every month. I was meeting with our clients on a daily basis, getting really important feedback. And I was really excited because we were getting our team together from around the country. We were all gathering at one place at the start of the year, the same kind of event I've been describing. And I was like, this is going to be so cool. We're all going to share ideas. We're going to collaborate. We're going to come up with this shared vision for the next year. And when I got there, we went to dinner.
To hear this.
We went to dinner. Everything was starting out good. And then the following morning, we show up, and the executive team has already prepared everything. They just talk at us for 8-9 hours that day. There was no really input requested at all of us. And it was also, the vision itself wasn't aligned with what a lot of us had been experiencing meeting with our clients. And so that is really an important moment, because the thing I stress is that, like, there was no just continuing as is for me. It was either this meeting was going to go really well and I was going to get re-energized by it, or it went poorly and I was going to get really demotivated from it and realize that this company doesn't really want my input. They've got their own vision, and I'm just there to put in the reps, if you will, of
yeah.
It was motivating. And had they shown that effort to allow us to have that input, I think it could have been a really enriching experience.